Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Wyenberg. This time we will continue our reading of Aunt Jenny and the Delayed Quest by Jim Burroughs. Aunt Jenny and her companions are on their way to seek the assistance of the jinn. Aunt Jenny slept well for the first time in days. She woke to find Sasha up and about, preparing a meal from their supplies. "Did you get much sleep, my dear?" she asked Sasha. "Some. Mostly I enjoyed strolling about without pounds of hot metal on. This whole champion gig is hella uncomfortable." "You'll have to complain to management," said Jenny with a smile. Sasha smiled. "That'd probably only get me demoted to cook, slaving over a hot fire under a desert sun." Aunt Jenny sniffed. "Well, you do seem qualified. That smells delicious. What is it?" "Stew made from some of the dried goat and lamb. The captain pointed out a fruit that works as a bit of a tenderizer. They soaked together with some peppers and onions, and then I cooked it with some greens in a tuber of some kind. It's not a potato. I've no idea what it is. It's been cooking for about an hour. The meat isn't as hard as shoe leather anymore." "Well, it smells good. We're going to need to get going, so we'd better eat." Dinner wouldn't win any awards, but for something put together from dried jerky, it was quite satisfying. Little Dickens thought it was wonderful, but Big Tom and Rudy preferred the plain jerky and wrestling over the last piece. By the time Jenny, Sasha, Three, and the animals finished dinner, the escort had departed for Iram. Jenny and Three cleaned up and packed everything but the tent, while Sasha changed back into her armor. As they started packing the tent, Aunt Jenny noticed soft red and orange glows among the hills ahead of them. "Any idea what those lights are?" "I asked Captain Bokatai while you were sleeping. They weren't as easy to see then. The sun was nearly full-sized. He only said that it was the burning lands. I guess we're supposed to know about them. One of those everybody knows things." He wasn't really into explaining. "I take it that there's naturally occurring fire out here. I get the feeling it's more like volcanoes or natural gas burning than California wildfires. Something about the lands themselves." He had familiar advice: avoid them. "That looks like it will be rather difficult, my dear. It seems to be scattered across the whole horizon ahead." "Yeah, it was just in those hills over there when I asked him." She pointed a bit dawnward of their heading. "Nothing for it, then," said Jenny as they fastened the tent onto the pack horse. By the time they reached the hills, the sun was definitely growing and brightening. They dismounted and were leading the horses. "It looks like there's some shade in those hills. Can you push on that far?" asked Jenny. "Sure. There's more of the burning lights just over the hill. We could camp during the heat of the day and hit them fresh come dimming." "Fine. It's kind of a shame to stop so soon, but walking or riding in this heat's no fun." "Agreed." "What's that?" said Sasha with a start. "What's what, my dear?" "Something burning just leapt over the hill? I don't know. It was just a dark shape with red and orange like glowing embers or flaming coals." "Something moves, live," said Three, pointing ahead. With that, they all stopped, trying to make out what was moving. "You have younger eyes, Sasha. Can you make it out? Or you, Three?" asked Jenny. "I'm sorry, no. There's movement among the rocks, something that glints in the glows of those fires," Sasha answered. "Not thing. Live. Fire." "You say the fire lives, Three?" "No, lady. Burning rock lives." Aunt Jenny sighed. "I'm not sure that I understand, Three." "Oh, my God. I see it now, ma'am. It's—" "What is it, Sasha?" "Big. Alive. Prowling. Like a cat. Shiny like glass. Black. Black and red." "Oh, I think I see." Aunt Jenny rummaged through her bag and retrieved a glasses case. As she put on her bifocals, Sasha took a step forward and squinted. It's like a shiny black tiger in reverse, black with red, glowing red markings. Bad thing, very bad. The creature was still some distance away, but as it moved out of the flinty hills, it became easier to see. Oh, Jenny inhaled sharply. It was indeed huge and cat-like, its head and shoulders ruffled, not the full mane of a male lion, more like the shorter ruff of some lion-tiger hybrids, wild and unruly. Its main color was a shiny obsidian black, with markings in the red of glowing coals. Slowly it crept toward them. There was a deep rumbling like that of distant thunder, a rumbling that came from the creature. We shouldn't run, should we? I don't think that would be wise, my dear, though it seems no safer to stand and let it approach. The closer it came, the more they realized its terrible size. As it crept steadily forward, the horses began to pull against their reins. The beast was now only about 15 yards from them, and they could see that the markings were cracks in its surface, as if its obsidian skin was parting to show the living lava or magma within. As it breathed, they widened and shrank. Aunt Jenny was never certain if she heard the voice, felt it in her bones, or just imagined it. "You shall not pass," etched itself on her being, echoed in her mind's ear. Suddenly, Big Tom leapt from the basket he'd been riding in, landed, and walked to Aunt Jenny's side. The beast's rumbling growl briefly became a threatening roar. It hunkered down as if getting ready to pounce. Big Tom strode forward a length or two before Aunt Jenny noticed. "No, Tom, get back, stay back." The beast's gaze shifted from Jenny to Sasha to Three before landing on Big Tom. It inhaled deeply, causing its cracks to widen, revealing more of the red, orange, and yellow magma burning within. It seemed to grow taller as its chest expanded. The rumble deep in its throat went up in volume, a menacing snarl. Big Tom's fluffy hair stood on end as he puffed himself up. He continued to walk straight at the beast, a soft growl, little more than a loud purr, though one filled with challenge and menace. He stood as tall and fluffed as Jenny had ever seen him. The beast's glare fixed on Tom, and it leaned forward into its menacing position. Big Tom's own gaze locked on the beast, and he strode ever closer. The intensity of his deepening growl continued to increase. The beast crept slowly forward, menacing and prepared to pounce. "Oh, Tom!" Aunt Jenny heard Sasha gasp. "No, not my Tom, not another Tom." Aunt Jenny dared not move, couldn't breathe. Tom's shoulders were held wide as he prowled forward with a menacing swagger. His ears pulled back, and a rumble started as a loud purr became a distant, constant, threatening growl. The beast leaned forward and hunkered down, teeth bared, its eyes locked on Tom's. Its head alone was bigger than Tom, large though the cat might be. Jenny shook her head to drive out the intruding image of the beast swallowing Tom whole. Only a few feet separated the two felines when the beast left its crouch and stretched to stand tall, gaze still fixed on Tom. It rose as high as it could, fully bared its teeth, and cocked its head to one side. It inhaled and swelled, revealing more of the burning lava within. And then it stood taller still and began to shift in shape. Its ruff lengthened, its chest broadened. It was transforming. As it did, the cracks would widen and close again. Its face began to look human first, followed by its body. Slowly, a gigantic, naked female human took shape. Her skin was still the shiny obsidian, cracking to reveal a core of burning magma. She stretched her neck, tilting it to one side and then the other, releasing awful bone-breaking cracking noises. The snarl on her face twisted through a sneer to a tooth-bearing smile, still tinged with menace. "Well played, little one," she chuckled. Big Tom hunkered down, twisting his neck to look up at her threateningly. Then, suddenly, his growl stopped. He stood up full, turned, and swaggered back to his post at Jenny's feet. He had, it would seem, accomplished his goal, defeated his foe. Aunt Jenny breathed for the first time in ages. Steam hissed out of the cracks in the beast woman's skin. Flames licked here and there across her body. She began to glow all over as the light of her flaming magma core shone through the translucent obsidian of her naked body. She stepped forward and with each step shrank just a bit until she was barely 7 feet tall and standing just a couple of feet away from Aunt Jenny. She radiated heat like a stove or a furnace. Aunt Jenny was forced to step back. The creature laughed, and as she did, her surface cracked more and more. Obsidian pieces began to flake away and fall off in chunks until her figure was formed of nothing but glowing red magma. It shone brighter and brighter. Shards of red molten glass fell away until she was a being of pure fire and light in shifting reds, oranges, and yellows. Her hair cascaded down, clothing her in fire, and she slowly rose, her feet dangling a foot above the ground. "What," she boomed in their skulls, "brings you to my realm?" "We seek only to pass through," Aunt Jenny replied. "Pass through?" The question racked them. "We are on our way to the mountains of Kaf in the north, to the Enough!" she demanded crushingly. "For the sake of your brave champion, you may pass, but you have no purpose here." The wind began to whirl about them, picking up the sand until they were engulfed in a whirlwind. Sand, wind, and blazing heat tore at them. And then the wind died down, and the air cleared, and they found themselves standing on a flinty ridge overlooking a broad valley. Beyond the valley, a range of mountains stretched. There, at the heart of the range, stood 3 tall, gleaming green peaks. "Dschinnistan," gasped Sasha. The burning lands were now far behind them. Sasha knelt down and scruffled Big Tom behind the ears. Aunt Jenny, I'm not sure that I believe you about the big guy not being your familiar. I think I just saw him negotiate our free passage, or at the very least stare down a Mazzikim." "I believe the correct word would be Mazzika, the singular female, but yes." Jenny knelt down next to Sasha and joined her in petting the cat. "Well, she certainly was a singular female, and I'm pretty sure it was him that she called your brave champion." At that point, Rudy poked his nose in and pushed up on Aunt Jenny's arm. She petted the dog and smiled. "Yes, you too. Who's a good boy?" she told him. "Well, let's push on. That has to be the peak we're headed for, and we probably do need to stop and rest for a while, even if it's not for the whole of the daytime." "3 show," announced the scout. And with that, they resumed their journey to Jinnabad. Chapter 14. Aunt Jenny on the road to Kaf. 3 led them down the ridge into the valley, where they remounted and made their way through woods that might easily have been rural New England. As they reached the valley floor, oaks and pines gave way to fragrant cedars. They made their way northeast. Everything was so much like home that winter by dawnward seemed completely out of place. Toward the mountains until they came to what Al-Bahith's maps seemed to indicate was Dawn Brook, a broad stream a couple of feet deep. After crossing, they stopped to dry off and get a bite to eat. Aunt Jenny tried her hand at the jerky stew recipe after pressing Sasha to get a short nap. The young woman woke to the scent of the stew mingled with that of the cedars. Wow, I needed that. And to wake up to such homey smells, we could be having a picnic on the banks of the Hockomock. She inhaled deeply. It almost makes you forget just how weird this place is. Heck, even the sun seems to be behaving. They ate in companionable silence, washed the pot, their utensils in wooden bowls, and packed up. 3 fed all the table scraps and a bit of jerky to the animals. So, asked Sasha, what do you think genies are like? Mazzikim and the jinn are always said to be similar, but from what we just saw, a stone and lava beast that becomes a woman of fire and light, it's not at all obvious what like that is. I think we're going to have to play it by ear. So, just the same old, huh? Sasha smiled. And we might as well enjoy how like home these woods are while we can, without getting complacent and dropping our guard. They continued their northeasterly course for another hour or so, first along narrow woodland trails that eventually widened into broad grassy tracks wide enough that they could easily ride side by side. Still, they saw no sign of other travelers, even wagon tracks or hoof prints. It was late afternoon when they arrived at a broad river. The mountains were clearly on the other side, and Alba Heath's maps indicated that going around it would be a considerable detour. I wonder how deep it is. Should we go upstream looking for a ford or try our way across? Sasha asked. There's nothing on the map to answer either question, I'm afraid. I'm not even quite sure where we are. There are a couple of roads that cross the river on the map, but I don't think we've been on any of them, replied Aunt Jenny, standing high in her stirrups. You could always ask for directions, said a soft lyrical voice behind them and to their left, startling them both. They jerked their heads around to see a tall man leaning casually against a tree at the edge of the wood. At least, he had the general form of an adult human male, though neither woman could readily recall any man that beautiful. Handsome didn't seem the right term for him. It felt too rugged and coarse. Without being feminine, he was clearly male. His features were too fine and delicate for handsome. No, he was beautiful, or gorgeous, perhaps. They stared. I'm sorry, he said, nearly sang. I didn't mean to startle you. He stood up straight and took a step or two in their direction. He was tall and slender, dressed in a green tunic and brown hose and boots. His hair was a light russet-tinged bronze color, and his skin a very pale gold, the early morning sun on rich cream. In his right hand he carried a tall walking staff. A dagger hung on his left hip, and he had a small rucksack over his shoulder. His smile looked as if it was concealing a hearty laugh. After another couple of heartbeats, Aunt Jenny and Sasha spoke at nearly the same time. Yes, directions would be very helpful, said Aunt Jenny. Where'd you come from? Challenged Sasha, after giving herself a little shake. The laugh almost escaped, and he swept a bow, deftly passing the staff to his left hand with a sweep of his right. I have been walking from there, he gestured upstream to the right, in that direction. His hand swept downstream to the left, and stopped to enjoy the view. He turned and bowed his head to Aunt Jenny. It would be my pleasure to be of assistance, milady. You may call me Aunt Jenny. Thank you, madam, Aunt Jenny. And you? Some call me Philum. If we wish to travel to the mountains across the river, what would be the best and safest way, then, Philum? Safe? The mountain ways are not safe, especially for mortal folk. Safest? With proper invitation and escort by the denizens of the lands ahead. Best from here and now? Upstream, less than a league, there is a ferryman, he frowned a moment. A mixed blood, a nephil, I think. Best to cross there. And for escort, asked Sasha, can you recommend? The laugh came even closer to escaping. It would have been an honor, but I have a mission, an errand, perhaps anon. But for an escort, any or all hereabouts, another dryad, a peri, a nephil? He shrugged. Will that be all? Yes, replied Aunt Jenny, except to offer our thanks. Accepted. Travel safely. And with that, he twirled his staff from one hand to the other, stamped its butt on the ground, and started off downstream. They watched him go, and after a bit, Sasha turned to Aunt Jenny. Phew! What was he? He implied he was a dryad, a wood nymph. A nymph? Did someone change the definition? He didn't look anything like any nymph I ever heard of. I mean, he was spectacularly beautiful, all right. He had that part, but the maiden part? Or am I missing something? I don't know. I may have read something about male dryads or nymphs, but without my books and network, I can't be sure. It's a terrible thing to be a librarian without a library. Well, I suppose it makes sense, declared Sasha after they'd turned their horses and headed upstream. What does? Male dryads or whatever? I mean, what we know are only stories and fables. If nymphs and fairies and dragons are real, then, well, where do they come from? Either they're created in some miraculous form, or they have to reproduce, and that's a whole lot easier with sexes, no? Aunt Jenny nodded. After a while, she added, but of course we don't know that in a magical place like this, they have to be of the same species. The fairy tales are full of cross-species couplings and mixed-race or species offspring. Philem called the nephilim mixed blood, which matches the story. Yeah, and there is a certain sex appeal across species. We've seen that. Oh, really? Any time recently? They both laughed. Soon, a small cluster of buildings and a dock came into view. It looked to consist of a substantial inn, at least one farm, and a boathouse. A ferry boat was tied to the dock. As they got closer, the scale of the buildings became clearer, as did that of the occupants. All of the buildings were at least 10 or 12 feet to the story, and the shirtless fellow out front chopping wood was about 8 feet tall. All of a sudden, my growth spurt seems a lot less impressive. There were giants in the earth in those days. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown, quoted Aunt Jenny. I'm sorry? It's a passage from Genesis about the nephilim, the giants in the earth in those days, said to be the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, demigods. Like Hercules. Different stories, but yes. No mistaking him for a dryad. By now, the wood chopper had taken note of them. He sank his axe in the stump he'd been chopping wood on, wiped the sweat from his brow. The comparison to Hercules was apt. He was massively muscled, with olive skin, long curly black hair, and a full beard. He wore loose-fitting broadcloth trousers fastened with a heavy leather belt and tucked into calf-high boots. Greetings, strangers, he boomed. Well met. Good day to you, sir, said Sasha. This is my lady Jennifer, healer and scholar. We come seeking passage across the river and perhaps an evening's respite. Welcome to the Ferryman's Rest, he replied. We can feed and shelter both you and your ponies and fare you to the other side. I am called Helgrim, crofter and ferryman. Crofter? Asked Aunt Jenny. Your farm seems pretty grand for a croft. 'Tis a word from another land. And, he pounded his chest with a blow that might well cripple a human, are we not a grand people? Sasha dismounted and looked up the 2 feet into his eyes. You do look like you do things on a grand scale, it's true. His laugh was on much the same scale. Come, my boy will tend your ponies. Guard, where are you, boy? A young nephil, barely taller than Sasha's shoulder, came running from the barn. Shall I have the boys settle your belongings in a room or rooms? We've several for folk your size, alone or in groups. What's the custom for strangers repaying your hospitality hereabouts? Asked Aunt Jenny. It does depend upon the stranger. Service, trade, and coin are all accepted, as befits the traveler. Illum crown coinage? An Illum crown or two would be just fine. Perhaps even news or a tale, be they good enough. You do look to be well traveled. Jenny smiled. Not from hereabouts, at least, she nodded. Yes, please have our luggage brought up. She turned to Sasha. Separate rooms? Sleep in a bed all your own? That could be a nice break. Yes, if you like. 3 sleep with horses, he volunteered. That's not necessary, my dear. Horse is good, not so closed. He hunkered down and mimicked being trapped or shut in. Very well, if you prefer, Aunt Jenny relented. Come, urged Helgrim. My wife Flora sets out a good table. And we'll become acquainted with the table that Flora sets out next time.